Hi, all our lovely podcast followers. It's Laura, and I'm inviting you to enjoy a good, inspirational summer podcast binge on us. Throughout the month of August, podcast subscribers will be receiving full, uncut versions of our conversations from the Meet the BIPOC Press series, which features journalists of color covering people, places, and perspectives beyond the narrow casting of the commercial news. Take a listen to what happens when media bring a race-smart angle to their reporting on the environment and corporate greenwashing, the future of journalism and reporting on policing and Palestine. Hear from self-defined movement journalists who are out there covering campus protests and the election process and more. If you're listening but have yet to hit the subscribe button, you're missing out. Subscribe, get all the juicy extras, and please consider joining our team by becoming a monthly supporter. No ads, no commercials. We rely on you. And when you do your bit to support this podcast, you keep it free for everyone. Now, indulge in a summer binge listening session to the podcast where the people who say it can't be done take a backseat to the people who are doing it and get inspired. Now, on with this week's show. What is Christian nationalism and how does it threaten democracy? Earlier this year, I had a chance to talk with the producer and director of a film that digs deeply into that very question and sounds an urgent alarm. The Republican Party, with rising Christian patriarchal fervor, they report, is mixing a messianic message about Trump with an extreme plan for establishing a white Christian nation. And the combination poses an immediate threat to both secular democracy and Christianity itself. In God and Country, a documentary based on Katherine Stewart's book, The Power Worshippers, director Dan Partland and producer Rob Reiner talk with scholars and activists as well as Christian leaders, like Reverend William Barber of the Poor People's Campaign. As we hurtle towards the 2024 election and we have learned more about the right's plan, including the deeply Christian nationalist Project 2025, the stakes couldn't be higher. And so we here are revisiting this film and my conversation with Partland and Reiner. Reiner first came to fame as an Emmy award-winning actor in the groundbreaking television series All in the Family, and went on to become a renowned director of some of the most popular films in American film history, including When Harry Met Sally, This Is Spinal Tap, and The Princess Bride. He's also a dedicated political activist and the director of Shock and Awe, a film which exposed the lies that led to the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Dan Partland, an award-winning documentary producer and director for film and television, is a 5-time Emmy nominee with 2 Emmys for Best Nonfiction Series, including one for American High on Fox. I started by asking Dan, what do we need to know about January 5th, the day before the insurrection at the Capitol in 2021?
Well, the uprising, the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th was basically a Christian nationalist uprising, which is not to say that everybody there was Christian nationalists, but it was a unifying theme. And I think what people should know is that it wasn't coincidence that all of those people were at the Capitol that day. There were churches and a lot of Christian groups, conservative Christian groups, organizing concerted protests to bring people to the United States Capitol on January 5th for a thing they had done a bunch of times prior called the Jericho Marches. The idea of the Jericho Marches was to symbolize, in Christian terms, the taking down of the government. The story of Jericho is that the walls come crumbling down. So they had brought everybody to the Capitol, and it was well known, highly publicized within certain Christian circles that the event on the 6th was going to be an effort to undermine, to block the election, the certification of the election.
Well, it all drove home to me just how much more seriously we need to take this phenomenon and how much more closely we in the media need to look. Your film, God and Country, directs our attention to this question of Christian nationalism. And to kick things off, let's give our viewers and listeners a chance to check out the trailer.
America and Christianity are like baseball and apple pie, and we celebrate them together.
I was 16, 17 years old when I became a Christian.
I'm an evangelical minister.
I've been a Christian my whole life.
I'm a
Christian nationalist, I have nothing to be ashamed of because that's what most Americans are.
Is Christian nationalism Christian?
No, it isn't.
We should be blazing forth as a countercultural example, and instead, we're leading the charge of malice and division.
Christian nationalism uses Christianity as a means to an end, that end being some form of authoritarianism.
Being a Christian is about the values of inclusion. Christian nationalism is certainly not based on the values of the gospel.
God wants America to be saved. They're told over and over and over again that you're in danger.
You need to fight if you don't want to lose your country.
We are in a civil war between good and evil.
This is not a movement about Christian values. This is about Christian power.
What happens to the people who don't believe this stuff?
We are on the precipice.
God is on our side. We're taking our nation back.
The thing that keeps me up at night is that we lose democracy.
Does that seem possible?
Yes.
Coming to you, Rob Reiner, one of the producers on God and Country. American as baseball and apple pie, is it? Christian nationalism?
Christianity is certainly a part of the fabric of America. There's no getting around that. The problem that with Christian nationalism is they claim that America should be a Christian nation, that it was founded by the founding fathers to be a white Christian nation. And we know, based on our Constitution and how it was written, very clearly there is a separation of church and state. The problem is to say that Christian nationalism, this, which is a political movement, it's not a religious movement, it's a political movement, that should be tied into what is American, is a little misleading.
If you were to summarize, what makes Christian nationalism of today different from perhaps the conservative religious movements we've known in the past?
The current Christian nationalist movement, which, as Rob said, is a political movement, is not a faith, has become the dominant form, the dominant expression of Christianity in America. That's what's really scary. And you pointed out in your intro that it represents a danger not just to American democracy because of the ways in which they can use both democratic and anti-democratic means to try to implement this Christian agenda into law, but also the danger that it represents to the church itself because of the ways that it's co-opting the idea of what Christianity is about and undermining the central tenets of the faith.
We have experts in the film, very conservative Christian, devout Christians, leaders, thinkers, pastors, who talk specifically about how this movement is completely antithetical to the teachings of Jesus. And that's really what is what you have to focus in on, because the idea that you could promote a political agenda in the name of God, and that would give you permission to resort to any means to get what you want, up to and including violence, which we saw on January 6th, is completely antithetical to the teachings of Jesus, which is love thy neighbor, do unto others, and so on.
One of those theologians you talk about who appears in the film is Russell Moore. He's the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today, and he makes exactly that point.
The Bible does depict a warrior Jesus, just with a very different kind of warfare. The warfare takes place spiritually through the means of the gospel, not through physical violence. In the New Testament, Jesus repudiated that when his own disciple, Peter, pulled out the sword to defend him from being arrested. And Jesus said, put away your sword. Those who live by the sword will perish by the sword.
How big is this movement?
Christian nationalism, the way we talk about it in the film as this political movement, it is not the majority. It is far from the majority. And what is scary is that because of the way our system works, a very virulent minority can control our politics. And that's what they've done. They've figured out a way to take this movement, which is very well funded, very well organized, and much more so than it was historically, which started back in the 50s, and they've funneled this organization into Donald Trump, and he is their spokesperson for this. And so you can gain a tremendous amount of power with maybe 20, 25, 30% of the populace.
Donald Trump seems like a pretty unlikely Christian leader of any stripe. Rob?
Yes. I mean, when you think about what he's done, I mean, the man was found guilty of rape, essentially, sexual assault. And, he's cheated on into his businesses. He's stiffed people. I mean, the list goes on and on.
How do they seek to wield power in what is supposedly a democracy, which is ruled by the majority? They're a minority. Dan, so how do they imagine they'll do it? Or how are they doing it?
I think they are using both democratic and anti-democratic means. And the problem with some of the things on the democratic end of the spectrum is, in general, we in America, we embrace that. Make your case by persuasion. Move the public point of view in order to get laws enacted. But there are a couple of exceptions to that. And those are contained in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is inherently an anti-democratic check on majorities, so that even if you get the votes to insert elements of any particular faith into American law, that is not allowed. That is not allowed. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It still happens, but it's not. It's unconstitutional. The more concerning thing is the ways in which this movement has, as it's felt its power diminishing in the electorate, it's become increasingly anti-democratic. So that's everything from gerrymandering districts. Both sides obviously do that, but gerrymandering districts inherently anti-democratic. Voter suppression has become a main goal of this movement, and intimidation. And then obviously violence itself, both on January 6th and at other times, is, and I think we should expect to see more political violence in this coming 2024 cycle.
This is Laura Flanders and Friends. Today we got a taste of the documentary God and Country, released earlier this year, about Christian nationalism. What is Christian nationalism? What is the threat it poses to democracy and even Christianity itself? Those are the questions producer Rob Reiner and director Dan Partland explore in this film, which is based on the book The Power Worshippers: Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism by Katherine Stewart. Next, we'll hear from evangelical pastor Rob Schenck, a former pro-life leader who speaks in the film about ginning up fear to raise money. Also coming up, Laura shares some closing thoughts on outsourcing politics to others and the price we pay for privatizing the process. If you'd like to watch the clips we're playing from God and Country and see Laura and her guests in action, you can by going to our YouTube page. Laura Flanders and Friends also airs on public TV as well as on community radio and in addition to as a podcast. All the details are at lauraflanders.org. That's also where you can subscribe to our newsletter to receive information on all of our web exclusives, including the full uncut conversation from today's show. It includes much more about how Laura and her guests imagine undoing the damage done to our democracy and what Reiner thinks of the TV series Succession and Billions. Again, all the information is at lauraflanders.org. Our discussion continues, but first here's Promised Land Homage, a rework by Barbara Tucker and the B Crew of the Joe Smooth classic, courtesy of B-Star Music Group.
Sister, brother, we'll make it
There's violence and intimidation, and then there's fear and anger. And you have another very powerful participant in your documentary, God and Country, and that's Rob Schenck. People may remember that name, evangelical pastor, used to be a leader in the Right to Life movement. I remember him from the days of Operation Rescue. He is singing a slightly different song, but he tells the story of how the tactics worked.
Evangelical enterprises raise billions of dollars. We're not talking about millions or even hundreds of millions anymore, but billions of dollars in mostly $10 to $25 contributions. Well, the way you get those contributions is by ginning up fear and anger. When I was an activist on the religious right, I would meet with fundraisers. I would hear from them, "You've got to give me plenty of fear and anger. I need to make your people as mad as hell and frightened to go to sleep at night, because when they're that afraid, they're going to send you a lot of money."
So ginning up fear and anger to make money. It all sounds incredibly hypocritical and cynical. Is it, Rob?
Well, yeah, obviously it is, but they know it works. Yeah. And that's the problem. I mean, you can gin up fear and anger, and it can be directed in any particular direction. And if you are feeling disenfranchised, you're feeling like you've been left behind, if you're feeling fear that the other are starting to take over the country, and that you might at some point become a minority yourself, and that you believe that this should be a white Christian nation, that could engender a lot of fear and anger. And so they can then use that fear and anger not only to raise money, but to move this political movement along.
What you've just described is mirrored in a sense by maybe some of the rest of us not finding a way to explain to people why they feel things have been taken from them or are being taken from them that isn't about the other, that instead perhaps tells the story of corporate extraction, government capture, taking from the poor to the rich and solidifying that power of money in this country that leaves a lot of people feeling shut out. Dan, as you think about the work you hope this film will do, who's your target audience and who are you trying to reach?
There's a lot of people, American Christians, who are starting to really be ill at ease with the overall direction of their political leanings, of their church, of this movement in general, and they've been swept up in it. So we're definitely interested in reaching those people because I think those people are reachable.
We want religious groups, church groups, to take a look at it and share it with their flock and say, talk to each other. What do you think about Christianity? How do you feel about it? How do you feel its movement? Is it representing true Christianity? We want that discussion to hopefully proliferate. I think also we're seeing around the world the rise of autocracy and theocracy, and it's a clarion call to say this can happen here. So we want people beyond, the people who are questioning what direction their faith is being taken, but just generally the idea that America is the beacon of democracy for the rest of the world. And if that democracy crumbles, then it portends a danger throughout the world. So we want everybody to understand that a small group of people can turn a democracy inside out and destroy it.
The best comment that I've gotten so far, I did a faith-based podcast a week or two ago, led by a pastor who was shocked by a lot that he had seen. He certainly knew it because he was experiencing it in his own life. But his thought was that it showed up so much more clearly in the film than the way he experienced it in his own life. And he said, sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to show us who we really are. And I thought that was chilling. It was something that I'm very worried about because you never want to be an outsider. You want to get deep into a subject so that you're telling it in a way that makes sense to the people who it is most central to.
So you're hoping people will watch the film and not be distracted by the fact that you have a lefty activist Jewish filmmaker, Rob Reiner, as producer. Is that basically what I'm hearing, Dan?
No. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. No, I think, look, we come together in this country as Americans. And so to some extent, I think the idea that there's any less credibility or any importance that we're going to look at what the faith profile is of the filmmakers to decide if we want to see it or decide if it's important or it's somehow tainted. The film is the film. People should see it and look at the group of people, of dedicated, good citizens who came together in good faith to talk about this urgent problem. And that's what the film is about.
There is something about evangelicalism that I respect, which is that within certain boundaries, they do believe that people can be changed, saved, rescued, converted, that we're mutable in our beliefs, as our democracy system is also mutable, for good and for less good. Rob, you've gone on a journey yourself, you've talked about in the context of this film.
Even though I am Jewish, I was not raised that way. But in a time in my life when I was going through the worst period of soul searching, I read everything. I read Buddhism and books about Christianity and Hinduism. I read everything, and what I came around thinking is if you look at the core teachings of Jesus, that makes the most sense and made the most sense to me. The idea of do unto others. And there's a reason why it's called the golden rule, because if you can live by that, everything else falls into place. You don't need the 10 commandments. You don't need a lot if you just live by that rule. And then I look at this film and I look at what's happening in this country, and it seems like we've come so far from those teachings, which Reverend Barber, who you mentioned at the beginning, brings us all back to at the end of the film.
Christianity at its best is committed to love and truth and justice. If we do this right, what a country we will be.
It's wrong to think of it as a light switch that's either on or off. You're a Christian nationalist, you're not. The way most of the scholarship views this is really as a spectrum. It's a continuum. And some of the best research on this classifies some different groups, ranging from what they call ambassadors of Christian nationalism, who firmly believe that this is a Christian nation and should be reflected that way in law. And the next tier is accommodators, resistors, and then full-on rejectors. Well, in this top class of ambassadors, those are probably most of the people we're talking about when we say Christian nationalists. This may be as much as 20% of the population. Okay, that's a huge, huge number. 20% who have deeply held beliefs that the United States is and should be officially a Christian nation and are looking to write that into law. That's the population that we have to be worried about. But what makes it so difficult to address is that when you consider the next tier, people who you'd call accommodators of Christian nationalism or even resistors, now you're talking about really almost 2/3 to 3/4 of the country have at least some bit of Christian nationalist belief. And some of it is fine, of course. This is basically a Christian nation. There's a background of Christianity throughout the history of this republic. The sort of benign ways that it starts, which is just recognizing that there's a lot of Christian people here, quickly becomes a slippery slope with this casual language of, well, but the United States is basically a Christian nation. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I think what we have to do is we have to draw that bright line again between the separation of church and state, which is a foundational American principle, which I cannot believe in the year 2024 is becoming fuzzy to people.
Well, one of the things I learned that I didn't know before, Robert, from the film was just how recent it is that the word God appears on our coins and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, I was in school, actually, in 1954 when they added under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. It used to be one nation, indivisible. Then it became one nation under God, indivisible. And I remember when that happened, because we gave that pledge every morning in school. So it really started happening around then. And we've seen it grow over time. But the question you ask, which is how do you undo it? And the way in which you undo it is not, you're never going to get that hardcore group of people that just believe it and you can't convince them. It's those other layers that Dan talked about. If you can get to those people to make them understand that this is destroying their faith in a way, it's undermining their faith, that's the way in which I think you can undo it. And then there's all kinds of pie in the sky kind of things, like getting rid of the Electoral College and things like that, which would actually make it more democratic and majority rule, because we are not really majority rule in the country. There are a lot of safeguards for the minority to make sure that they're not, run roughshod over, by the majority. But when that minority gets too much power, then they're running roughshod over the vast majority. Mm-hmm. And so that's what you have to wrestle with. And that's it's in our civics classes, and people have to understand how it works. You hear this every 4 years, that this is the greatest and most important election in our lifetime. This one actually is. I mean, democracy is on the ballot. And Joe Biden has made that case. And we have a choice here. And it's a very stark choice. We can either choose to continue this wonderful experiment or take a big step towards destroying it. And so, to me, 2024 is the key. And I believe that Americans at the end of the day are going to choose democracy over autocracy. I have to believe that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both. Rob Reiner, Dan Partland, the film God and Country. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
There's a story that Rob Reiner likes to tell about Ben Franklin, who was asked after the writing of the Constitution whether the country had emerged with a monarchy or a republic. A republic, he responded, if we can keep it. As Reiner and Dan Partland's film reveals, keeping it is going to take some work. And while I'm no evangelical, there is something to be learned from the actions of the Christian right. Democracy, as they understand it, is no static thing. It can be changed or captured, and some at least are out to do just that. It all makes me think about the democracy that was written about by French philosopher Alexis de Tocqueville, who toured around the United States in the mid-1800s and found it to be a very democratically participatory place, with meetings happening all over and people actively engaged in the process. Fast forward 100 years, and by the end of the 1900s, it seems to me we kind of privatized the process like so much else, outsourced it to professional politicians, pundits, funders seeking to wield power and influence. Can we grab it back, make it active again, play our part? Well, if ever there was a time to answer that question, this year would be that time, say our guests. You can find my full uncut conversation with Rob Reiner and Dan Partland about their film God and Country through a subscription to our podcast. It's free, and all the information's at our website. Thanks for joining us.
For more information, check out our show notes posted at patreon.com/TheLF Show. That's also where you'll find an invite to watch the premiere of each week's show on our YouTube channel and chat live in real time with Laura Flanders, Sundays at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please take a moment to share what you thought of today's report on social media and tag us. And if you are subscribed to this podcast via Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to write a review. It helps tip the algorithms in our favor. And thanks to our monthly Patreon members and all who have donated and supported the show. Your generous contributions make it possible for this show to remain free to millions on public TV, community radio, and as a podcast. Not a member yet? Commit for a few dollars a month or whatever amount you'd like at patreon.com/TheLF Show. Remember, A little goes a long way. Thanks for listening.
This show's produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, with Sabrina Artel, Nat Needham, David Neumann, Jeanette Hernandez, Sarah Miller, Rory O'Connor, and Jeannie Hopper. Major funders for this program include the Novo, Park, Shift, Cloud Mountain, and New York Women's Foundations, the Rising Fund, the Tides Foundation, the Women's Foundation of California, Just Impact, Jane Fonda, Kim Connor and Nick Roombridge, the Wilson Family Fund, and listeners like you. Stay kind, stay curious. Until the next time, for the Laura Flanders Show, I'm Laura.